part 4 of a series that we've been doing on data science. It's a primer on data science. The first section was on research methods. The second section was on statistical methods. The third section was on software applications. And this fourth one is on academic writing, which is a little bit different. It's a little bit different part of the brain, but honestly, you may be conducting amazing studies, doing the right stats, being able to explore really cool software applications. But if you can't present it, whether it's a manuscript or whether you're trying to get a grant, then you're not going to be successful. So you need to be able to translate the information you have captured in your stats and in your software and turn it into a piece of work. So that's what we're going to focus on tonight. So the objectives of this is to understand best practices in grant writing, learning the basics of getting an article published, learning best practices in developing a concept, and learning best practices in effective writing. So again, that could be broad. It could be journal articles. These could be research studies, commentaries. They could be abstracts, and those abstracts can be oral presentations or poster presentations. There's other forms of publications. There are literature reviews, systematic reviews, and for many of you, it may even just simply be writing grants and writing reports. Dr. Ali and I have collaborated on a number of articles now, several different types and formats. The most recent one, the one we're really proud of, it's a brief review and primer of key terminology for artificial intelligence and machine learning in hypertension. So this is one example. This is really it's a review article. It's not a research article. So I'll show you some other examples of that. So let me go here and let me pull up some examples. So another example of a type of work is a book chapter. So this is a chapter on exemplars in e-health. So this is a case study. I wrote this with a colleague from Walden University, and it's really kind of a case study on how we use our care plans and our digital content technologies to improve health. That's one example. Here's a recent research study that I collaborated with a technology company called Hello Heart. So this is actually a research study. This was published in the Journal of the American Heart Association. And so you can see it kind of has a normal, an introduction, a methods section, and then it goes into after the stats, then you go into results. So then results, there's a table, there's usually charts, yep. And then more tables, and then finally, these kind of studies end with a discussion section. Here's another article that Dr. Ali and I collaborated on. It's looking at mental health applications for generative AI and large language models in the United States. Here's a commentary article on artificial intelligence in cardiology. This one is a scientific advisory on digital technologies in cardiac rehab, a science advisory from the American Heart Association. So this one looks a lot more like a literature review, a lot like our AI review article. So this, again, not direct independent research. It's more of a collaboration. There's some other types of works I'd like to show you. I got to pull this out of the way of my Zoom meeting. So here's a grant that we wrote. This is a collaborative grant. It's called the C prototype. As you can see, grants typically don't look as nice. It's really an audience of reviewers primarily. So a lot of text, not quite as much in the form of graphics, very small margins. So these are examples. Sometimes you can fit in a figure or a table, but these grants tend to be much more text heavy. Get a couple more here. And then, yeah, let me just finish up with an example of a report writing. So this is a report on self-measured blood pressure. This is much, the aesthetics and the appeal here is much more important. These need to be much more readable, have a lot more graphics, because you want people to actually read these. A grant proposal, really the reviewers are the only people that are going to be actually reading the document. So those are some examples. Let me go back to my slides. Another form of a publication, sometimes we forget about, is a poster presentation. And this can actually be a good opportunity, especially if you're an early career researcher, you're not really ready to be writing a bigger manuscript. And so again, the way a poster presentation works is during the conference, there's literally a section where you literally create a poster and you pin it up. And there's usually a time allotment where you literally stand next to your poster and people walk by and they may ask you questions. So it's a good way to get started. This one happens to be one I did actually with my son. This is a poster called Teaching That Heals, and really kind of a historical perspective of concepts of health literacy. Poster presentations really always start with as an abstract. So this is actually the text that was used to submit for the poster presentation. So none of the graphics, none of the flow, but all of the text that's contained in this abstract, you can actually find. You could literally read that abstract by going through the poster, but the poster adds a lot more graphical information to it. So how do you get started? So a couple things to keep in mind. First of all, just take stock of your writing experiences. And frankly, nobody's born as a good writer. You get good at writing by doing a lot of writing. Okay, so even if you feel like that's an area of weakness, the good news is you can overcome that by doing a lot more writing. Sketch out your existing writing practice. How do you write? What do you write? Outline your ideal writing process. Do you like to do it in little chunks? Do you like to be drinking coffee? Do you like to be listening to wildlife in the morning? Whatever your process is. Learn from other writers. Identify your own personal obstacles and blocks. You want to make a plan with a clear sequence of steps. Identify helpful resources. Set a timeline for reviewing your goals. Establish a system of evaluation. Be active in your writing community. And even if that community is, your own personal community, just practice writing. Celebrate progress and accomplishments, and reevaluate and set new writing goals as they come available. So what you're doing is you're learning to become a scholar by doing this. So you're learning scholarly writing, which is different from, maybe how your Facebook posts or Instagram would work. What you're going to want to do is you're going to develop your scholarly voice. So the question, how do you become a good writer? In my experience, is to read a lot, read articles, read different types of publications, but also read other forms, and that'll help you develop your own scholarly voice. Some best practices: be direct and concise, use evidence. That's where the other three sections will come into play here. Be careful with your citations. Be objective. Speak and write as a scientist. So you're becoming experts in your field. So speak in that tone. Doesn't mean you speak over people's head or beneath them, but speak as a scientist and use the literature to support your assertions. Avoid offensive or marginalizing language that could limit your research, and use your specialized vocabulary, know your audience, and have some original thought. So again, how do you develop that voice? Work for precision and clarity. You want to edit yourself mercilessly. So that doesn't mean changing your mind, but it just constantly be trying to perfect and improve upon what you're doing. Avoid expletives. There are, it is. Eliminate yourself and intensifiers. So the study versus I believe. Avoid the veries and reallys. Vary your word choice. Don't start every sentence with I, and don't make your sentences too long or too short. Your point of view, most people either write in first person or third person. So the first person is I, the second person is you, the third person is he or she. So pick your person. Most people, and speak from a people first language. Use verbs versus verbal phrases. So examine versus look into, find versus come across, and verify versus look up. Use verbs that introduce. So Clark in 2012 reported on the study. A concept that I really had to scratch my head with for a long time is what's called active voice. So there's active and passive voice. Active is preferred. It's really the order of your words in a sentence, with the active voice being the subject, the verb, and the object. So an example of an active voice: I conducted a study of healthcare professionals. A passive voice would be: a study was conducted of healthcare professionals. That may seem like a subtle, but really strive and really work on developing your active voice. Another example: I will present the results of this study at the AHA. Again, as opposed to at the AHA, these results were presented. This is an active voice because the subject in the sentence precedes the verb, clearly indicating who will take the action. Some things to avoid: colloquialism, slang, biased language, rhetorical questions, using second person language, and what we call jargon jam, just using a lot of jargon. Don't use vague adjectives and adverbs like very, feeling words like I feel, big words for the sake of using big words, meaningless words, metaphors, cliches, platitudes, and pejoratives, commonly confused words, and beginning the sentence with it. So Smith in 2016 found versus it was found. A good writer means good writing means good preparation. So set your writing goal. Articulate connections between your current writing and your broader professional skills. Overcome reservations and build confidence in your writing abilities. Establish a manageable path to success, develop motivation, build your self-efficacy or confidence as a scholar and a writer and a professional, and create opportunities to celebrate that success. Some elements of good project planning. So good writing means good planning. Carefully review the guidelines on the website, if available, and understand all the requirements of the journal or of the funder. Look for key elements. What are the goals of the funder or the goals of the journal? Does this align with your overall project, your overall research goals? What value are you providing to them? Who will review your paper, and who is the audience? The audience is super important. Knowing who that audience is, especially in scientific writing. Is your audience consumers? Are they other scholars, professionals? Are they decision makers? Are they funders? Are they clinicians? So know who those people are. Do the journals in my field share a common definition of the concepts I'm discussing? Could this term or topic be understood differently by different readers? Is this an area that is particularly present in my own environment? And am I assuming that the reader already believes important issues, the importance of the issue? Ethical considerations are also super important. If you're doing research, you should always have an IRB, an investigational review board. It's another set of eyes to make sure that you're really following good ethical practices. You should always be using informed consent. You should always be looking for bias and structural racism in your research and in your writing. And again, from a research perspective, there's what's called the Belmont Report, which are guidelines for researchers involving human subjects. I know when the power went out, some of my links went out. So let me see if they came back. They might not have. Because I had a link to the Belmont Report I was going to show you. But for time purposes, I'm going to leave it be. But the Belmont Report was written in 1974. It was actually a response to the Tuskegee study, which was an egregious breach of research ethics. They basically did a study of really the course of syphilis. So they basically randomized people with syphilis to they left them untreated, in many cases for decades. Obviously not the way we would want to be conducting research. So in the Belmont Report, there's really three main considerations: having respect for persons, using what's called beneficence, which means, you know, the subject, the person is going to benefit from this, and you're going to do no harm. And that there is justice, that there's equal justice, you know, in how the study is being done. You're always going to have a principal investigator, even if that is just you. But sometimes you may have co-investigators, and you may have what's called, you know, maybe an advisory board. You always need to be original, thinking about original and critical thinking. So what do you believe? What does your experience tell you? And what are you missing? So I can tell you my own story. My area of interest in health literacy really began, you know, working in cardiac rehab, realizing that people really go through a process of learning how to live with their heart disease. And this is true of other conditions, certainly diabetes and cancer. And so people do grow in their literacy skills. And yet a lot of the research on health literacy is really, it's a binary factor. It's you have skills or you don't. And a lot of the literature really did not account for growing in those literacy skills. And so the strategy of just simply accommodating people with low literacy, that is a strategy, but there also needs to be strategies for people who are growing in their literacy skills. So that means you need to use and learn from your own professional experience. You know, use and cite that own experience. And does your experience, is it supported in the literature, or are you seeing gaps? You know, contextualize your professional experience and see whether what you're seeing has been explored. Maybe it hasn't, and there's, you know, an opportunity for you really becoming a leading voice in that specific area. Look for what's called common knowledge. So here's some examples. The world is round. That's common knowledge. Doesn't need to be cited. Joe Biden is the president. So that's common knowledge, but within the United States, maybe people in other parts of the world wouldn't necessarily know that. Hand washing reduces infection. That's common knowledge for healthcare, in healthcare, but that would require a citation. And then things like alcohol-based sanitizers may not kill all bacteria. So that would be not common knowledge in all areas and also would require a citation. All right, so now let's move into writing a manuscript. So you're going to have a flow, you're going to be proofreading constantly. And I'm one of the worst proofreaders you can imagine. So I need to have other people's sets of eyes on anything that I'm writing, because if I look at it, it's going to look good to me, even if there are a lot of errors. Make sure your sources are credited and your citations are correct. Get colleagues to read, and also read your work aloud. Don't just read it, but actually, read it aloud and see if it sounds right, if it makes sense. The structure for a manuscript in a journal article, there is a definite format, like I was showing you in some of those examples. So you're going to start with an introduction. It's going to have a problem statement, followed by a literature review. In a journal article, it might only be a couple of articles or maybe even one study. But at the end of your introduction, you're always going to have your purpose. The purpose of this study was to investigate the relationship between blank and blank. You always need to state that. Then you move into your methods, your study design, your sampling method, and your statistical methods. Next are your results. You're going to talk about your descriptive statistics, your assumptions, and your findings. And then finally, the discussion, the implications for the field, implications for practice, any social implications, recommendations, and future research. Whether you're submitting a journal article or a grant, or frankly, even just writing a report, you're almost always going to start with a cover letter. That's your first impression. You're going to review the journal guidelines. You're going to use this to establish credibility, your affiliation and title. You're going to highlight the gap in why this article or why this project will fill. Avoid hyperbole. You're not going to boil the ocean. So focus on the things that you can do. Personalize that letter. Do not simultaneously submit manuscripts to multiple journals on the same material, and identify any funding that was available because of the study. You're always going to, after the cover letter, you're going to start with an abstract. This is a brief, comprehensive study of the contents of the paper. It's going to be a single paragraph, no indentation. You're going to use present tense to describe applicability and past tense to describe any research steps. And this should include the problem or argument, a brief exposition of the design and methods, summary of the findings, and summary of your implications. You're going to have the sample size, study eligibility, any limitations, implications of your findings, and avoid unnecessary wordiness. So that's a lot to put into a paragraph. So you want to have it structured. So you're going to start with what's shown here in red is the problem statement. You're going to follow that by a brief description of your methods. And in green, you're going to highlight your findings or your results. So that's really the structure of how you set up your abstract. When you're writing your proposal, follow the instructions for authors. Any grant, any journal, there's going to always be a website with instructions. Always follow those instructions. That's always the first filter for a reviewer. If you didn't follow the instructions, then it's an easy way to decline. Follow the aims and objectives. What are they interested in? Your abstract or your proposal is going to usually be short, less than 400 words. Align with your topic with the aims and objectives. Be concise about your topic area. And again, keep your audience in mind. When you're writing, each paragraph, think about what's called a meal plan. So again, to avoid unnecessary wordiness, the meal plan is your main idea, which is your topic sentence starting the concrete claim that the paragraph is advancing. Next comes the evidence, so paraphrase or direct quotes from the source material you're using to support your claim. Then your analysis, your explanation and evaluation of the evidence, followed by a lead out. So every time you write a paragraph, think of the acronym MEAL. Here's an example. So the main idea, the electronic medical records promote patient satisfaction and their ease of access. That's my main idea. Followed by my evidence. Certain programs allow patients to view their medical records in a password-protected online environment, okay? Then you're going to move to your analysis. The convenience of immediacy spans also to healthcare professionals. And then you're going to follow that. You're always going to lead out with a phrase. So this ease of access for patients and medical personnel creates transparency. So always think of MEAL. You can also be doing what's called summarizing. So articulate the basic argument and essential points. So you don't want to be plagiarizing. So don't do any copy and paste. You're going to summarize what you're hearing from these articles. Avoid just simply switching out a few words. And this is where really gaining your scholarly voice is super important. You may be paraphrasing. So a paraphrase is your own explanation or interpretation of another person's ideas. It's an effective way to resonate, to condense, and to clarify another source and integrate it into your own evidence and into your own writing. There's also synthesis. So it's critical reading and thinking to compare different materials. So now it's comparing one to another or the existing literature to your findings. So it's new ideas and interpretations, and it's an extension of the analysis. So anyway, so again, it's combining different thoughts. There are specific ways to handle quotations. You're going to put, you're going to want to use quotes sparingly. Put them in parentheses. If it's a larger block, if it's more than 40 words, you're going to indent and put it into a block. But you're always going to cite the author, the date, and also literally the page number or the paragraph number of where you're getting that quotation from. It's super important to be good and accurate with your evidence and citations. It's a central theme of scholarly writing. The research that you're doing, you wouldn't want other people taking that research as their own. And so you should be doing the same with other authors. You can synthesize, but don't plagiarize. Finally, graphical representations are also part of helping you tell your story. And in addition to tables and figures, always think about one clear and concise graphic. You know, refer to a table. When you're referring to a table and figure, always do that in your narrative. Don't just dangle it out there. You know, incorporate it into your text. This is how not to do it. So it needs to be readable. You need to be able to flow with it. So here's an example of a table. So you're going to label the table. You're going to give it a name. You're going to present your data in your table. And then you're going to have, you can put a footer if you need a reference or other examples, but keep your tables clean. Here's an example of a figure. So, you know, again, number the figure, give it a name, and then make it very clear and clean for your reader. In addition to tables and figures, think about a graphic. Think about one thing you can do to help you tell your story. So here's some examples of some graphics that I've used, and whether it's Life's Essential 8 or our health literacy model or our AI paper, something that, you know, a picture can be worth 1,000 words. So always think about that one graphic that you can do And frankly, that can be part of your social media post. It could be part of your cover letter. It could be really kind of that branding that you put on your work. Some of those could be, figures or models or just other explanations. But again, be thinking about that visual representation. Some of those grants I showed you with just blocks of text, it's really hard to read those. If you can break it up with a good graphic, you're going to be much better off. Here's another little thing. I think it's funny, but it's also super important. It's called anthropomorphism. It's basically a literary term that's used to describe giving human traits to non-human subjects. Okay, so when you say something like the study found, well, in reality, studies don't find things. Researchers find things. So be more precise. In the study I found, or the authors found. The study itself is an inanimate object. Again, be good and persistent at proofing and revising. Always be sure to address reviewers' comments, even if you don't like them. You need to have a thick skin. Don't take things personal. Be persistent, and remember that every project has a home. So, the journal might reject your manuscript. That doesn't mean that it dies. You just go on and look for the next journal or the next funding opportunity. When you're submitting, think about the cover letter, the abstract, your formatting and editing, selecting the right journal, and really aligning with the aims of that journal. Dissemination, so choosing the journal or the conference. Key considerations, is there a paper or a submission fee? A lot of open source journals now, that's how they make their money. But don't get sucked into paying a lot of money for publication fees. There are plenty of journals that will publish your paper without a fee. Also be thinking about, is this a poster presentation? Is it a panel discussion? Or is it an oral presentation? All right, now we're going to move a little bit more of the focus from journal writing into grant writing. So again, it's preparing your concept. So prepare the concept, provide the context, be sure to demonstrate the need. Why does your project need to be done? Talk about the design of the project. How are you going to do the project that you're presenting? And how are you going to demonstrate the impact? So what are the goals? What is your evaluation strategy? So just like with a study, you need to have an evaluation through your statistics. When you're doing a grant, it's the same thing. You have to have a way to show that you did what you said you were going to do. So some examples. So a concept paper is really a critical part of grant writing. So the concept paper, you're going to have a variety of audiences. It's not formally submitted. It really markets the concept. You pitch the concept and you keep revising based on the feedback that you're given. But it's a relatively high level. A formal submission is very different. It's competitive, it's detailed, it's longer, and you typically can't make any changes once it's submitted. A concept paper is a conversation about the project. It includes the content. The majority of the, you're going to focus on the concept, the high level, and the impact. You're going to share it with your stakeholders, your staff, your board members, your funders. And again, as it becomes more reality, then it's going to turn into a full proposal. The proposal focus on the science, the guidelines, the best practices. Evaluate. Look at who that funder is. You typically can't make any changes. And standard review procedures are followed. So in that concept paper, again, it's going to be relatively short. You're going to usually write this in first person. You're going to have explicit goals. You're going to write it in the style that's appropriate for the funder. And it's typically going to be about 1 to 5 pages in length. You're going to focus on the impact. You're going to talk about the risk reward. If it's a foundation, you may be even talking about the legacy that you're building, and really possibly even being a disruptor. This might be something new in there. But in a concept, you're really going to go from a paragraph, which is really your elevator speech, to a paper, to a bigger report. So think about your hook, your known information, the gap in knowledge, and the critical need. So the hook, I'm going to use my cardiac rehab as an example. So, cardiac rehab has been shown to reduce morbidity and mortality, reduce cost, and improve quality of life following a cardiovascular event. That's my hook. My known information is that less than 20% of patients that are eligible ever participate in a program. There's a variety of reasons for that. The gap in knowledge is that we think mobile applications could be an alternative to a traditional program, but frankly, there's not been enough research to really know that for sure. So that's the critical need. How do we demonstrate from a clinical and cost perspective the benefits of the program? So that's my concept. I'm going to then turn that paragraph, my elevator speech, into a one-pager. My background, my problem and hook, the gap and the need. And then you're going to move into your aims. The aims are the critical part of a grant proposal. What are you intending to do? And then you're going to move in from there to your innovation or your plan, followed by your budget. As that concept emerges and matures, it's going to get bigger. And so that's where it's going to go from a one-pager to a multi-pager. Here's a quick example. I can send you later. I had these up, but I've lost them with my power outage. But examples, I'll send these when I send out the video. Examples of concept papers that I've used in the past. So again, be thinking about mission alignment with the priorities of the funder. Look at the organizational strengths. Be clear and realistic. And a lot of times for a foundation, it really is an investment that they're making, and they're making in you. Be sure to have a clear takeaway so that they really have a good feel for what they're investing in. Understand the timeline that you're looking at. Is this a short term, maybe less than a year? Is this a 3 to 5 year plan? And be sure to be thinking about your timeline, and be sure to be budgeting appropriately. Thinking about your goals and objectives. So design the projects that include an evidence-based design, measurable outcomes, a strong return on investment, model replication. Make sure that you could repeat this if needed multiple times. Opportunities for volunteer engagement, sustainability, collaboration, and your timeline. Other elements to include, again, the mission-driven foundations typically want to fund the best work in the field. So really position yourself as that key partner for them in this opportunity. Look at their technical specifications. Many times they'll tell you what they are on their website. If they don't tell you, then a good kind of template would be 1-inch margin, single space, 11-point font. So again, don't have super tiny font, super thin margins, unless that's what they're asking for. Look at your formatting style. Is it APA, AMA, MLA? There's different types of formatting. If they're looking for a page limit, a word count, a character limit, sometimes, again, those are filters. If they're asking for 5,000 words, if you give them 5,001, that's a reason for them to reject because you didn't follow their requirements. Other key components, you can have an introduction, a purpose, a project description, your goals and objectives, your methods, your timeline, expected outcomes, your budget and needs, and then contact information. So here's an example from an actual grant. This grant was looking at the composition of peanut butter in schools. But again, you're going to have an introduction. You're going to introduce your idea, demonstrate you understand the mission of the entity, identify how your project meets their goals, identify any other funders that will be involved, and introduce the question, the problem, or the need. You're going to focus then on the need. Why does this project need to be done? Use statistics and data to help you make that case, cite any relevant sources, and frankly, why does this matter? Use statistics to help you tell your story. So in my cardiac rehab example, the 20%, of patients, also that, patients are about 3 times more likely to have a better outcome than people who don't go. So again, I'm using numbers, I'm using stats to help tell my story. Be able to concisely describe what you intend to do and be able to articulate those goals, aims, and objectives. Be able to articulate your methods and your timeline. And again, be able to use graphs and charts to know that your project is feasible. All right, we're going to follow up this last section. Many of you probably someday will be doing an NIH grant funding. So we're just going to dig in a little bit deeper on an NIH grant source. So there's actually an application guide. I had these links up. Let me just see if I can pull them up in real time for you. So here's this link. It'll be in the slides, but there's a link for how to apply for an NIH grant. There's other NIH resources. There's actually a YouTube channel. It's going to pull up for me. See here for NIH grants, so this can be very helpful. There's a NIH website for you to help you kind of as a guide for writing your application. There are sample applications. Again, read as many applications as you can get your hands on. That's always a helpful way to go about this. Look at the proposal components, again, the specific aims, your research strategy, and also any references. The specific aims are probably the most important part of the whole project. So again, spend as much time as you need getting those aims right. You're typically going to have about between 2 and 5, 3 is kind of a standard specific aims for your project. So yeah, it's quite possibly the most important part of the project. You're going to describe the goal, set the stage, clearly state your hypothesis and research questions, define those specific aims, and what do you believe the results are going to be. So it's kind of our same little formula here for writing your aims. You're going to have a hook, you're going to have known information, the gap in the knowledge, and then the critical need. So use this little 4-step formula for writing your aims. There's a reference here, Bioscience Writers. I'll put all of these links in the follow-up, but this is a really good resource again, for good practices in grant writing. So, what you want to do then is you want to progress from a good idea to a fundable idea. So you might have a great idea that's interesting, it provides value, but really to make it fundable, make sure it's addressing their target areas, their agenda, that it's aligning with NIH priorities, that you have measurable results, you have a clear path going from A to B to C. It needs to be innovative, adding to the body of knowledge, scaled from prior experience, and should be replicable. Some criteria for NIH. So the significance. So does the project address an important problem or a critical barrier to progress in the field? You need to talk about your investigators, your investigator team, your program director, your PIs, your collaborators. So do they have the expertise and the experience to actually conduct the study? So build a team. You might bring in a statistician, you might bring in a writer, you might bring in other people to help you accomplish the things that you need to do. They're also going to look for innovation. Does the application challenge and seek to shift the current research or clinical practice paradigms by using, your new innovative approach? You need to be able to talk about your approach, your overall strategy, methodology, analysis, again, and align that back to your aims and to how you're proposing to do your study. And then finally, your environment. Will it work in the specific environment, whether that be your population, your region, the type of facility that you're in? And again, that review criteria, additional things that they're going to look for: are you protecting human subjects? Are there vulnerable groups that need to be protected? And then look at other review considerations. Again, things that may impact the score. Again, when you're drafting your proposal, is it in the context of a wider application? Follow the template that they provide for you. Respond to any evaluation criteria. Make sure that you can justify your work, and you use your writing style, your tone, and technicality to determine what is appropriate. How does your work relate to other work in the field, nationally or internationally? What does the literature say? The answer to this question could guide grant seekers in that process. So ask yourself, what is the gap in knowledge? Does this work build on previous work? Which work is that? Does this work solve a fundamental challenge facing the field? Does this work duplicate other work? Does this work replicate other work currently in process? Will this work contribute to the field in short and long term? And is this work a priority for the field? Some other things to keep in mind: your organization, your infrastructure, the facilities and equipment, your research culture, and any internal and external partnerships. From an individual perspective, your expertise and experience, internal and external partnerships, any publications, any internal and foundational funding, and serving as a consultant or a co-investigator on someone else's proposal. All of those things will help you gain your experience. So similar to the grant writing, develop a concept, request feedback from mentors and other colleagues, and refine your concept based on the feedback that you receive. Essential components of that proposal is going to be your conceptual framework, So what theories or models or frameworks is this based on? This goes back now to our research presentations, your hypotheses and research questions. Are they clear? Are they testable? Are they actually hypotheses that can be tested? And so forth. Is it compelling? Look at the background and significance. Again, how are you going to evaluate? How is it aligned with your research aims? And highlight why these findings are important to you. Look at preliminary studies, look at previous work, and emphasize how your work is going to contribute to that body of knowledge. Look at your design and methods. So can you actually conduct this study in a way that yields the results that you're hoping to achieve? And again, for your narrative, again, like with these others, know your audience, write clearly, use skillful repetition, and refine and edit as you go along. Focus on your grantsmanship, the quality of your idea, and your level of innovation. Again, formatting, use a standard format. Don't get, 4-point fonts or crazy margins. Be logical, use figures and tables as appropriate. And yeah, again, just follow, use first person rather than third person in a NIH proposal, and tell a story, tell a logical story that you're trying to tell here. Finally, be sure on budgeting. If you're looking at multi-year, account for administrative costs, your IRB, any clinical factors, laboratory tests or professionals, any technology considerations, stats and writing, and other overhead to be considered. Just more on your, if it's not funded, really, you're going to get you're going to get more rejections than acceptance. So, use the feedback to really help you improve upon your proposal. Again, after you receive the feedback, decide, is the feedback fixable? Can you revise and resubmit? In most cases you can. After you receive, your feedback, contact the office and get, personalized feedback if you need to. And then finally, specifically address reviewer comments. So sometimes they'll give you really constructive comments. Again, don't take them personally. Take a deep breath and then respond to the substantive comments that they've provided. And just be persistent, follow up, and you'll be successful at it. So with that, I'll pause here and open up for questions or comments.